Hello, I'm Only Jax, and yep, you guessed it, it's our turn to talk about the Ethan Klein CPS drama. What a sad day when we're talking about Ethan Klein, or any creator really, having CPS called on them for literally no reason. This entire video could be summed up in a sentence. Everyone involved is either acting without tact, or just straight up childish. But if I were to leave it at that, this wouldn't be a very fun video, so stay with me here as we go along. A quick recap, and I promise it'll be quicker than normal. March 1st, Twitch streamer Denims plays a video by fellow streamer Bad Empanada, where he preaches a conspiracy theory about Ethan and Hila Klein letting dogs shit all over their mansion and their kids eating the dog shit, leading to the entire Klein family contracting a rare parasite called Giardia. Denims plays along as if this information were true, asking, "Is this real?"
From the dog shit that is all over his house.
And then continuing as if it is, with no real challenge or pushback. Amidst this, her entire chat is calling for someone to call CPS on Ethan and his children. A few days later, CPS is indeed called on Ethan and his children. Ethan and Hila go on their show to talk about the incident, involved parties responds, and the drama ensues.
He lets his dogs shit all over his mansion, and he just leaves the shit on the floor, something that is probably related to the fact that his former housekeeper is suing him for a number of different reasons. So I would assume he doesn't actually have a housekeeper anymore, or perhaps he lost his extra housekeeper. So now the house is just like covered in dog shit. And he has kids, and his kids like crawl into the dog shit, and God forbid, I don't know what they do with it. I don't know if they eat it, or if it's just from like contact with it with their hands or something.
Although, let's be real, you already saw the thumbnail and the title to this video, so you're already probably up to speed on what's going on here. I'm gonna talk about a few different parties involved with this whole thing, so if you notice down here on the play bar, it's separated by person. Please feel free to skip around to the one you're interested in, because this story does not follow anything resembling a straight line. So first, obviously, we have Ethan and Hila. For the purposes of this video, we're gonna consider them's the victim of this situation because, simply put, they're the ones with the kids who are now affected by this entire thing. Otherwise, innocent children are now being drugged into an online beef that, if not for a group of people who hate their parents, they have nothing to do with. And this next part may not make sense to the childless among you, but because his real-world children have been affected by an online hate mob, Ethan now has all the excuse in the world to go after anyone who he thinks took part in his children being targeted. It sounds extreme, but his kids are now involved. I'm childless myself, but put in his situation, I'd go scorched earth myself, so I get it. Up until this point, you could make the argument that Ethan has been overreacting to the hate mob and the snarkers and just making this whole mess worse, and honestly, I agreed with this take. Right up until whoever it was called CPS on his children, because now, well, you kinda gave him whatever excuse he needed. Once a certain line is crossed, you kinda lose the ability to not at least understand where Ethan is coming from. Having said that, I think the play to go public with CPS being called on him and an investigator coming out was an unforced error, because you gave the snark exactly what they wanted. These people already wanted to get under your skin and milk you for drama, and they've been proven right yet again. Up until now, the only consequences they've faced was having a few subreddits taken away from them, and maybe their public profiles put on display on Ethan's Instagram story for all to see. And so for them, it's a pretty low stakes game. They get to ruin Ethan's life and watch the fire burn while having no risk of getting burned themselves. So for this reason, I reckon that as it stands, Ethan and Hila are acting without strategy and putting their cards out on the table for everyone to see. And none of this is to say that I don't think Ethan should seek real world consequences for what's happening here. Again, they messed with his kids, and we don't have loser pays rules here in the US, so if it were me, I'd sue every person who I thought even had the smallest role to play in having a fraudulent CPS report made. I just maybe would do this in secret until it got out. At the end of the day, no matter how you look at this, the people who called, encouraged, and/or legitimized the people who ultimately made this call to CPS in an effort to break apart a family are the villains in this story. And it's absolutely disgusting to see this and the subsequent events play out. Covering drama is normally supposed to be fun and engaging, but at every point following this one, I'm filled with the sense of disgust and sadness that we've even gotten gotten to this point. Following this drama has been a bit of a roller coaster because I find myself flip-flopping between Ethan is right and a clear victim and Ethan is right, but he's also a really scummy dude. And I think that's an issue. The anti-Ethan camp brings up how Ethan has done scummy things in his past or his views on a certain Middle Eastern conflict as justification for why they're harassing him and now his children. This is the part that makes this whole drama just so disgusting and sad. The anti-Ethan camp, the snarkers, the childish mob, whatever you want to call them, continue to make themselves more unlikable and erratic, now being more unlikable and erratic than Ethan, which is a feat all on its own. They seem to be losing reasonable people due to their unreasonable behavior, and honestly, it's disgusting. As much as I don't like Ethan, I really don't like Ethan. This whole situation only serves to humanize and make him more the relatable party in all of this. I can't imagine that I'm the only one in the world who thinks like this. I mean, hell, you even got the quartering backing him up. Like, geez. Alright, let's talk about Denims. It's a real shame that calling names and making fun of people only serves to cheapen my critiques and lessen the strengths of my arguments, because I've had a couple of good ones ready for this script that I've removed in order to sound like an adult in this video. I can't imagine why I feel the need to sound like an adult. It's not gonna drive any views or watch time, but hey, I guess that's the perk of being a small-time YouTuber. I get to selectively keep my dignity. The single biggest piece of evidence for me in this whole who called CPS drama lies within Denims streams from March 1st. The timeline just matches up too good. You've got an anti-Ethan streamer signal boosting another anti-Ethan streamer's conspiracy theory that Ethan's kids eat shit, and the entire chat is filled with calls for someone to call CPS on Ethan and his family. And then, sure enough, a few days later, an emergency response agent from CPS shows up at Ethan's house.
He lets his dogs shit all over his mansion, and he just leaves the shit on the floor, something that is probably related to the fact that his former housekeeper is suing him for a number of different reasons. So I would assume he doesn't actually have a housekeeper anymore, or perhaps he lost his extra housekeeper. So now the house is just like covered in dog shit. And he has kids, and his kids like crawl into the dog shit, and God forbid, I don't know what they do with it. I don't know if they eat it or if it's just from like contact with it with their hands or something from the dog shit that is all over his house.
Dude, how is it that like maybe once a week I look into what Ethan Klein's been up to, and every time I manage to find more and more terrible shit.
The evidence, sure, is circumstantial, but it passes the smell test and is precisely what I believe to have occurred. Denims can be seen interacting with her chat during the calls to action about CPS, and it can be reasonably assumed that she sees people in her chat advocating for it, and Denims, of course, says nothing. Is this legally actionable? I don't think so. If it could be proven that someone in the chat called CPS, does that then make Denims legally responsible? Definitely not. But despite these things, it certainly paints her out to be a pathetic individual, or at the very least, paints her out to have no regard for the well-being of children. Now, okay, full disclosure, after writing that last part, Ethan Klein himself recounted that Denims did in fact say not to call CPS, and I'll let Ethan describe it.
Maybe she should think about issuing an apology and retraction.
Or at least saying calling CPS is fucking crazy. Don't do
Is it that hard?
please.
Oh no, what she does kind of, she goes, after being like, Ethan's the worst person in the world, and like, yeah, his kid, watching Bad Amp, and I'll be like, yeah, his kids crawl around and eat shit, and her whole entire chat being like, call CPS, but she'd be like, obviously don't call CPS.
This, of course, doesn't go against anything I've said, however. All I need to do is just put an asterisk saying, too little, too late. You know your audience is just a bunch of unemployed, ravenous degenerates who have nothing better to do than to make credible threats to call CPS, and you see them calling for that to happen, and instead of making any honest effort to reel them back into reality, you just sit there and stew in the shared hate you have for one man, still showing no regard to the innocent children who we now know became involved in all of this.
I assume he doesn't actually have a housekeeper anymore, or perhaps he lost his extra housekeeper. So now the house is just like covered in dog shit. And he has kids, and his kids like crawl into the dog shit, and God forbid, I don't know what they do with it. I don't know if they eat it or if it's just from like contact with it with their hands or something, but they contracted a parasite that I had previously never heard of in my life called Giardia.
I can already hear you typing, oh, but only Jax. As a commentary channel, you should be well aware that creators aren't responsible for the actions of their audience. And yeah, no shit. But this goes beyond that. This is a streamer interacting with her chat, giving almost no effort to correct course and get them off of this bloodthirsty CPS trail that they're leading themselves down. So yeah, I'll say again, she's not responsible in a legal sense, but in a moral sense, absolutely. It was completely on her to be the voice of reason and say that this isn't a thought her chat should even be entertaining, but we got none of that while the calls to action were at their peak. Let me introduce you to a hypothetical. Let's say you're having a house party. You're hosting the house party. You invite a bunch of guests. The host is the streamer, the guests are the people in chat. Now, you're talking about how you have beef with your neighbor, and your guests start talking about someone should call CPS on your neighbor. If you hear all of this and say nothing, and then a few days later CPS shows up to your neighbor's house, are you responsible for your party guests doing that? Probably not. Are you morally responsible for not tamping down that kind of talk? Absolutely. For just this alone, I think you are pathetic. But that's not all. Upon the revelation that CPS was indeed called and sent someone to investigate Ethan and his family, Denims decides to minimize and downplay the actual trauma this could have on the children by saying, oh, none of this really matters really, because they're not going to remember it anyway. Because children at that age aren't forming memories.
Create any bad memory for them. You're not forming memories at 3 years old, and it's very rare that you're forming memories at 5 years old. When we're talking about being able to remember, being able to recall memories, it's like 4 is the cutoff. But even if you are forming any memories at 4, you're not going to be able to remember them past like 15. You have maybe 1 or 2 memories. Yes, you will remember. So everyone in chat here has a collection, like 50 plus memories of when they were 3 years old.
I said this before I saw Chud Logic say this, but now that we both got it right, I feel like it's okay to say this is kind of a PDF argument. I guess, Denims, I ask this question. Where do we draw the line? I mean, if they're not going to remember it anyway, would it be okay to walk up to a toddler out in public and scream in their face and threaten to hurt them? Would me be showing my hypothetical 4-year-old niece ISIS beheading videos on the big screen be okay because she's not going to remember it anyway? Or would it be okay for Ethan to beat the living shit out of his toddler children because they're not going to remember it anyway? Would some other type of abuse be any less harmful and traumatic to a 3 or 4-year-old because they're not gonna remember it anyway? You see the point that's being made here, don't you? You understand how little water this argument holds, right? Your Honor, you have to understand, I beat the living shit out of my kids when they were 3 and 5 years old, and so when you think about it, no real crime has been committed because they're not gonna remember it anyway. Again, pathetic. But wait. There's more. Check out how she says Ethan is a bad father because he spends his days editing videos, then immediately after says that Ethan is probably a good father, while simultaneously insinuating that being a good father and husband is simp behavior.
I've said multiple times, I'm not going to ever comment on whether or not I think that this guy, Ethan Klein, is a good father or like his relationship with his family. What I will say is it's very loser behavior to have a wife and kids and spend all your time in the editing dungeon. That's just pathetic. That's a comment on you being a pathetic loser. That you would rather spend your time editing a video that is in unbelievably poor taste, is just not well researched, just very pathetic overall, instead of spending time with your fucking family and being like, actually, I don't give a fuck about this drama. That's just you being a loser. That's just you being an internet degen loser. And if anything, honestly, with the way that this guy simps for his wife, I believe that he's a great dad. I believe that his kids ask him for whatever he wants or whatever they want and he just gives it to them. Have you seen how hard this guy fucking just gives Hila whatever she wants? He literally doesn't fight her on anything. This guy's probably a great dad. He probably cares the most about his kids and his wife above all else.
So which is it? Should us men bend over backwards to make our wives feel like queens or not? Because that would make us a simp. Or is it like that meme where girls like to be complimented, so I call her pretty, but then I also remember that girls like to be teased, so I call her a retard? Denims' words say one thing, but her tone says something completely different. It seems less like she thinks he's a good father and this shouldn't have happened to him, and more like she's trying to rewrite history for us to think that she always thought he was a good father and didn't deserve this. I honestly don't know what I expected out of her either. I don't think she's a very intelligent person, and at this point, the only reason I think her viewers think she's intelligent is because they're even less intelligent than she is. Or they don't think that at all and are instead the real simps in this situation. Now, it, of course, wouldn't be a fair and balanced drama if Ian and Anissa didn't have to chime in for literally no reason. Mr. and Mrs. Anissa Joma have once again committed yet another unforced error when it comes to their public perception. And of course, it's during the lead up to another creator clash. I mean, of course. Background on this one. iDubbbz, as a joke, I think, tweets that Ethan and Hassan should box in Creator Clash 3. Ethan doesn't like this, and so he goes on record saying that it's not funny.
I like iDubbbz. He's a good guy, but I don't like this tweet. It's stupid. It's not a fucking petty beef. It's like, this guy is evil and he's doing anti-Semitism. And also, he's way out of my weight class.
One of Ian and Anissa's editors posts the same H3 Snark conspiracy theory that the kids are eating shit. Correction, it's conspiracy theory adjacent. It's about how Ethan managed to kill his dog by leaving pills on the floor, although that's a pretty bad read of the situation. Here's the tweet for reference. Ethan reasonably assumes that Mr. and Mrs. Anissa Joma see this post and say nothing. Ethan doesn't like this either, seems to reach out privately, and that amounts to nothing, then has this to say on his podcast.
Anyway, this guy was saying shit like that Hila's a Nazi, that she kills kids, that she went on like, she's a IDF baby killer, all this types of shit. And that's showing up right up on Anissa's and iDubbbz's feed. My good fucking friends who I stood by after all these fucking years can't find a spine to speak up. You know why? Because they'll get murdered for saying one goddamn fucking thing in our defense. Like, actually, Hila's not a baby killer. Actually, accusing Ethan of killing his dog is maybe too far, because they have mobilized such an insane harassment group that anybody who says any fucking thing, they will attempt to ruin their lives. And once again, I'm the crazy one. It's not bad enough that I have this group of people harassing me and everyone in my life. It's that people outside of this group, journalists, creators, are actively participating in this gaslighting to make it seem like I'm fucking crazy. Like, dude, I probably done and stood by iDubbbz and Anissa more than anybody. I've stood by them when all the internet hated them, because I love those guys. I vouched for their character, and I stood by them 100%. And listen, I'm not saying that they're not the good, nice, fine people that I thought they were, but I'll say this: I don't think they're fucking any friends of mine. That's what I'll say at this moment. And certainly, I don't think they're any fucking friends of mine based on the text conversation I had with them too before I even talked about it. So I have nothing. I don't need any fucking halfway friends, man. That's not what I need. How could you not say something when this is like, imagine like one of you guys is like, Hassan actually wants to go to Gaza so he can strangle Israeli babies. Or some shit like that. I'd be like, you imagine me not saying something.
After this, Mr. and Mrs. Rainbow Kids go on their podcast to halfway explain the drama between them and Ethan, and then give our little trooper some advice. I've edited this down for brevity, but you have all the context you need.
This is for a very specific subset of people who are very upset at my DMs.
We want to stay out of the drama as much as possible. We don't want to pile on and add to anything. So this is our, lukewarm addressing of it.
We don't condone harassment.
We don't condone harassment of any kind. I think harassment online is like, we felt it. We felt plenty of it.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of why there's been a shift in my content, is because it's not fucking healthy for people's brains, and it like doesn't get you anywhere. Like,
the last thing somebody who's going through something like that needs is more eyes on it. Whether or not people who are in it right now realize it on any side, the more people who weigh in, the more people who add to the conversation, the more people who amplify it, the worse that it gets. We were in it. Yes, there was this attitude of like, why the fuck aren't people saying things? Mm-hmm. Why the fuck is no one like saying how wrong this is? Mm-hmm. Like, of course we had anger about that, but like we had to, now that we've gone to therapy and we've worked through all these things, like, one, the videos have not stopped, right? The comments about us have not stopped. What has stopped is me caring about it, me looking at it.
I remember, looking around at my close friends, my internet friends, loads of people, and just was like, this is interesting. Like I'm not really getting private messages of support, at least not from the people who I would expect to get it from. And that hurt a little bit. They aren't paying attention.
They're literally not paying attention.
Obviously it's great to show support. Like, people love that.
People are so busy though, but that's life. Like, that's life. You know what I mean? Like, people go their separate ways all the time. Again, like, the worst thing you can do is feed into it.
Now, on the surface, I think this is pretty okay. For the most part, right message, wrong messenger, because, I mean, the two people who are notorious for handling controversy well. The two people who totally didn't tank their last Creator Clash event because they got butthurt about someone making an OnlyFans joke towards Ansia. Anyway, the reason I include this in the video you're watching right now is because, despite this being pretty lukewarm and standard controversy advice, this post was created after the CPS stuff went public. Which means they either recorded this episode, saw that the online hate mob had now begun to target Ethan's kids in the real world and didn't care to maybe cut this part out, or recorded it after and still thought the messaging here wasn't completely tone deaf. I say this all the time. You're better off just saying nothing. In here, we have a clip of two grown adults suggesting that Ethan Klein needs to chill out and seek therapy rather than taking a hard stance against the harassment that is now targeting his children, all the while not taking a clear stance against calling CPS on his children. They see all of this and then go public to say, you know what, Ethan, ignore it. Right. Okay, for sure. I think it's very telling how throughout all of their talk about how in their dramas, people didn't reach out like they wanted them to, and certain people were silent and didn't defend them and yada yada yada. But the fact of the matter is, every time Ian and Ansia have been involved in controversy, Ethan and Hila have been behind them for all of it. After every controversy they had, Ethan has brought them onto the H3 podcast to be a friendly voice in support of them. Like, I don't understand this. Why say anything at all if what you're saying isn't he's had our backs for years, and I think that what's happening to him and his kids is awful. I know that Ian and Ansia have a history of trying to be buddy-buddy with Hassan Piker, and I also know that Ansia is either friends or friendly with Denims herself. All of this to say, to me, Ian and Ansia's statements here are less to give good advice and more to remain friends with their hip, cool Twitch friends. It just sucks to see people who are supposed to be friends not stand up and support each other. In the long run, however, I will say, this is probably for the best for Ethan and Hila because, as has been shown throughout history, the biggest brand risk to Ian and Ansia isn't Sam Hyde, it's Ian and Ansia. Alright, so this next one is a short one. Ethan and Hila don't like this person called Adam McIntyre. Apparently they've had some drama. Both groups involved seem pretty scummy, and I wouldn't want to hang out with either of them. Hila on the H3 podcast says that Adam McIntyre needs to disappear.
But someone like Adam especially, who's like on record being like, I respect snark.
Adam McIntyre needs to just like disappear. That guy is a piece of shit, like, of the lowest order.
Gosh, I feel like I'm writing a scene from Mean Girls. Anyway, Adam responds with a whole video reminding everyone about how much he doesn't like H3 and says why, and fair enough. But then Adam McIntyre is told about, or maybe suddenly remembered or whatever, that back in the ye old times of the 1990s, before Adam was born by the way, that Irish people would sometimes have their lives ended and their bodies buried by an Irish rebel group, and those people are referred to as the disappeared. Adam McIntyre is Irish also, that's why this connects. And I know I'm not doing this Irish history bit any justice, and my reasoning for that is gonna connect here in a second, but bear with me. After this revelation, Adam makes another video about how much he hates H3 and brings up, oh, how dare you say that I need to disappear? How dare you not know the history? This, that, whatever.
She never threatened you, loser. She said you should disappear from the internet. You became such a snarker, it's pathetic. She didn't say I should disappear from the internet, we just watched the clip. Now, do you want to know why I have a problem with this? So, I am from Derry, I am from the north of Ireland, and sorry, I was looking up when Queen Elizabeth, because that was a year before they started platforming me. So, the disappeared are those who were abducted, murdered, and secretly buried by Republicans during the Northern Ireland Troubles. Where am I from? There. So Hila Klein did not say that she wanted me to disappear from the internet. Hila Klein said she wanted me to disappear. My entire brand is being from Derry in Northern Ireland, and it's just crazy to me that they've latched onto things so minuscule and they don't get any backlash. But they are able to go on their platform and say that they want me to disappear when it is literally known that that is a term used for people where I am from and grew up, for them when they were abducted, murdered, secretly buried by Republicans during the Troubles.
I don't want to sound like super nationalist or anything, but literally no one in America would have any idea what the fuck you were talking about unless you just spelled it out for us just now. Like, that's such a horrible read. Listen, Adam, seems like the majority of your beef with H3 is legit, and that's one thing, but hear this. Literally no one outside of your circle would have thought to think that Hila Klein was insinuating that a right-wing Irish rebel group should end your life and bury you. That is a wild mischaracterization of what she said and shows that either you have a lack of self-awareness, are okay blatantly lying to make someone look worse than they already do to some people, or both. When you stoop down to this level of hyperbole and exaggeration, all you do is give credence to Ethan and Hila's claim that you're a clout-hungry lunatic. I don't think you're a clout-hungry lunatic, but I think that less today than I did before you posted that. But that's it. In closing, dude, how did we get to a point where online hate and harassment is leaving Reddit and getting CPS called on someone who isn't an established lolcow? And I know that for the snarkers, Ethan is a lolcow, but I mean lolcow in the traditional sense, like Trish Chan or Joshua Block. I worry personally that this is the start of a trend and not the climax of a series of unfortunate events. Not to sound like an Ethan meat writer, but I think he's right here. Reddit and Twitch are enabling this sort of horrifying and dangerous rhetoric that now has real-world consequences on children who have nothing to do with any of this. My real only takeaway from all of this is that one day, I'm gonna get married and me and my wife are gonna run a baby factory for a few years. We'll have 2 or 3 kids and do our best to live a happy life and raise them well, and with all that going on, I'm not gonna mention any of it to anybody. At least on the internet. My family won't know, of course, but that's a whole different thing. Maybe a quick story here or there, but nothing of substance, because one day I might have a take that pisses off a mob of childless, unemployed, degenerate losers. And if I've been open about my family life, I risk breaking our family apart because of some freaking neat's desire to feel powerful for half a second. I do not end this one with high hopes for the future. I did not enjoy writing this, and I hope that this whole thing comes to an end with responsible parties being held accountable, and at least a few grown-ups being able to take charge of all of this. I've been Only Jax, and until next time, boycott Twitch. You made it to the end of the video, you should subscribe, or maybe just leave a like. Leave a comment if you please, but I'd rather you subscribe. I check that shit like every day, and when that subscriber number goes up, well, my heart goes up to the sky. When you do